So this is for Lab 1. I've finished the grading in this part of the assignment. And so some of you do really well, and some of you haven't really got uh, some of the basics right. And for those of you that have left a message to come see me during the next office hour, please do come. And I do think that you need some help. And let's figure out how best I can help you. And now let's kind of go through this particular exercise, okay? So I've borrowed an exercise in the book, and the solution is even provided to you that is for that exercise. And then hopefully you could have learned from that. It has quite a bit of a code that is very much relevant to what we covered. It covers a couple of points that I wanted to sort of help you understand, and that is the intention there. And then the challenge here is to modify that program. So just remember that in your career, if you're going to be writing programs in a team environment, if it's not a solo effort, okay, then you will be modifying somebody else's code. You usually don't really start from scratch. You have, a lot of code that's already in place. Now you're tasked with implementing some kind of feature or fixing some bug or improving the code and, do some refactoring, right? So this is sort of an exercise in that regard. Just kind of tell you where I come from there. And it's, of course, just to start off of the course, and I would not ask you to write a program, just basically from scratch. Okay, so this is a good starting point. And what I've asked you to do now, actually, let's take a look at. So basically, there's three things I've asked you to do. So first is to change the for loop, a regular for loop at line 40 to a range-based for loop. And then I want you to calculate something, basically the average price of all products with a, a precision of 3 decimal places. This has to do with the formatting. And then I want you to use array for the storing the product IDs instead of the vectors. All right, so here I give you an assumption because for for arrays you have to specify the size. Those are fixed size arrays. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at how I solve this, just kind of show you an example what I've done. Now, of course, when it comes to coding, the solution obviously is not unique, okay? But I'm just going to show you what I had in mind. Now, first of all, some of you, maybe you are encountering too much of a challenge, then let's figure out how I can help you. Your program doesn't compile. It's basically 101, right? Programming 101. Your program has to compile. And then for that is really just a basic. If it doesn't compile, I can't even verify what your program is doing. I'll try very hard to figure out what you've done right. Parts of it, I'll give you some partial credit. But typically, if your program doesn't even compile, you're probably not going to be getting much grade, right? So here I kind of show you what the changes I made, right? So this is the README file. I just want to kind of point this out. Actually, hold on. This should be just a hash symbol. Anyway, so ignore that one for now. This is just basically a comment. It should be just a hash instead of a double slash. Now, this is really the purpose that I have asked you to do your first assignment, which was not graded. If you've gone through that, this is what you should be able to do. And for all your programming assignments, you need to be able to use the build to tool to configure, build, and run your program. And so the configuration step, this first command. Now, this what I'm showing here is for Mac. Obviously, you know what it is for Windows. That everything is documented. You need to just use that command. Now, this is a one-time thing, pretty much, unless you introduce a new external dependency, and I'm not going to ask you to do anything like that. So your repository, when you check out your assignment, that will be set up already for you, okay? So this is just a one-time thing. When during your development, while you're writing the code, making changes, do whatever, you'll be just simply writing, executing this B command that will build your program. And yeah, that's the simple. If you make a change, you build it, okay? Make sure it passes, it compiles, and then you actually can run the program. And when you run the program will be available at this location for Lab1. This is actually a symlink to the executable that's basically built, put into the other folder. That's for, it's a separate folder parallel to your code base for your project. And of course, there's a bunch of artifacts managed by build too, and you don't have to pay too much attention to that. All right. Now, what do we need to do? Now, so problem number one, right? So the ask number one is to deal with that for loop. Now, keep in mind though, here I'm actually not showing this. Maybe next time I will show the progression, but this kind of, because there's three different asks. Some of the changes will be overlapping a little bit, but I'll just kind of. So first of all, this I've asked you to do a range-based for loop. Okay, so range-based for loop. Now you'll quickly realize. Now my ask, the requirement can be a little. It looks deceptively simple, right? But then you'll quickly realize, oh, once you say do a range-based for, by the way, now these are the things for purely for exercise, for academic purposes. You don't really program this way in real life. Again, in real life, there's obviously better design. Now you've learned classes, and perhaps you need to group those things in a class, right? So again, we're just talking about exercising the skills due at the time when you learn those things that are relevant to you. So take at that value, okay? Now, so here, of course, you realize, okay, now you got the ID. Through the range-based for loop, this is now remember, this is a vector, which is a container. Okay, it's a standard container, and that container is a range. The reason you can use the range-based for loop because this is a range. What defines a range? We'll talk about that a little bit later, and then you will understand. There's basically, you need to have a certain functions in this class that make it compatible with this range-based for loop, okay? So anyway, the most standard containers, basically all standard containers will support range-based for loop, right? And so this is essentially now you have access to ID, the product ID each time you loop through it. And of course, this will be changed, right? So previously, you're accessing the ith element through a index. Now we just essentially getting the element directly through the range-based for loop. And then that's not enough because in this same loop, we're also accessing the sort of the parallel uh, objects for quantity, for unit cost. Um, they all have the same number of elements as product ID. So we do still want to maintain that index for those things. Now, so here, what I've done is I have a init statement. Remember, this range-based for loop can take an init statement. So we initialize a local variable I, stands for index, right? So I keep the other things intact. Now, that's really, once you have this, you need to advance I, obviously, okay? Previously, you could have done this in a regular for loop, right? But right now, that cannot be done in a range-based for loop. This is the syntax. So then you separate this as a uh, uh, sort of the last statement in that loop body. And this is the equivalent. If you move this to the very bottom, like this is equivalent, whether you put it over here or at the very bottom. So, in the lecture, I also explained how you can convert one form of the for loop to another, right? So just so that you understand really what's going on. Now, so that's one ask. Another thing is to calculate the average price. Some of you, well, actually, most of you got it right in terms of understanding what this average price is about. And I didn't mention that this is for all products. So you need to divide the total cost by the total quantity. And so that is, and then, okay, what is the total quantity? We don't have that value yet. Well, you need to calculate it, figure it out, right? So this is how we can figure it out. Using a for loop here, looping through that quantity vector, which is container. Again, so it's very natural to use range-based for loop. It's just obviously, less code to write compared to the regular for loop. And it's very intuitive also. So then we essentially just accumulate, right, all the values, and with the total quantity, initialize that to 0, okay? This is using the default initialization here. And then you get the total quantity. You add all of them together, so this is the sum of them. And then here you go, that's your average price. And the formatting part of it, so here, some of you are using the stream manipulators. That is fine. Obviously, the intention, as I said in the lecture, it's more preferable to use this format function. It's just more versatile, and it's actually more intuitive when you read a string. You don't really break that up into multiple pieces if you have variables inserted in between, right? So anyway, that if you got that right, you get the grade. That's fine, right? But the thing is that this is sort of the intention here, and of course you see the example. The existing code is like that, and so really the trick here is you need to use the fixed representation for that. This is a double type, right? Floating point. And so I've explained the format specifier, what they mean, right? So this is a simple utilization of that, and then the .3, and this is basically 3 combined with a fixed representation. These are the 3 decimal points, okay, decimal places, excuse me. So yeah, 3 decimal places is not the same as, if you did not have this F here, and then that would not be 3 decimal places, okay? And that is the second ask. And the third one is to, adding a little twist here to be able to use a standard container. I wanted to use an array. So if you have a need to use an array instead of using a C-style array, which is still fixed size array, and use the standard one. The standard one, you can use it just like a C-style array, except you can use it, it has a lot more features, the way you can use it. And there's really no reason why you would not use this, replacing your C-style arrays. Unless it's a legacy code, you want it to be compatible, you need to deal with something somebody else has written. Yeah, then you have a a need perhaps to convert or bridge it. Anyway, so here, instead of the original vector, now we are actually making an array using this template. It's a templatized class, and we're going to study class template. I think we explained the class template next. Well, let's see, in 2 weeks, okay, we'll be explaining the class templates. So at least we have seen many of these, and you need to know how to use them at this point. So one of the things that I noticed some of you are using a number right here in this parameter, template parameters. That is not the best practice. Typically, that's called a magic number. You want to just make a constant, okay? Preferred way is to make a constant and that assign a meaning to it. And here, then you use this max product, for example. And again, I give you the assumption. So at most you have 100 products. And so this is, of course, large enough to hold for what we need. Now, here we're using the default initialization. This is going to initialize all the elements to 0. And you can choose not to initialize, but in the case of fundamental types or when you deal with maybe again, it's actually good practice again. So the book also advocates you always initialize in the most cases. In some cases, for performance reasons, you may not do it, but you have to really be sure what you're doing. You're not reading random value. If you don't initialize it, the elements will be holding random value. It allocates a space in the memory that would be whatever value was there before. Okay. So that is you got this array here. Now in this loop to read the products, right? To read the information from a standard input, and used to be a while true. Now you can still maintain that while true, and then and now it feels like it's perhaps a little more appropriate to use the regular for loop now. Then because we are also capping how many products we are reading in. So because that's how much we can hold. If you really put in 100 products, and it will stop at 100, and 101 will not take it, right? And so use a regular one. Now, why would I put this init statement outside? Because I want to use this value later on, okay? And we'll see why. And so I call this product count because I intend to use this to maintain the count of the products. So you see that previously we used this pushback, and that is the function, member function on a vector to add an element to the back of the vector, right? And as I explained, a vector is backed by underlying array actually. And so it's added to the back. Now that function is not available on the array. As I said, this standard array, the way you use it, just like what you're familiar with the C style array, don't be afraid, right? Use this subscript operator. And in fact, now, because you've studied the operator overloading, right, you should understand, okay, well, what's happening? How is this supported? Because the array class implemented the operator overloading, okay, it has this subscript operator function, and it supports it to make it feel like the C-style array, okay? So that's why. And then the reason this can be put on the left-hand side, and then this is actually because this operator function returns a reference to the element that allows you to modify that element, okay? So anyways, so we are, here we're just assigning, this is how we just, provide basically assign a value to a element at a particular location. And then why would I make pull this out? Because I want to use this as a stopping condition for the next for loop, the range-based for loop. Now, well, remember, because this product ID now is an array of 100 elements, right? And well, we initialize most of them to 0, pretty much they're all 0 until you fill in with whatever the value you're gonna put in from the command line. Well, you could have put in 0, but which is unusual, but then you could. That's just saying. But then, so how do you know how many products you're supposed to process before you stop? Well, we already counted how many products you have put in, right? So then, of course, we want to use this as a stopping condition. Now, imagine this were if this were a regular for loop, and then you could have a condition essentially equivalent to this, right? You would just basically have I less than the product count, and that would be the stopping condition for the loop. And so, well, of course, now we're not using that, right? The requirement is, okay, use the range-based for loop is a little awkward, but again, right, it's the exercise. I want you to be able to use those primitives. So this is saying if the index is greater than the product count, then we know we can stop, okay? We have processed all the products now. So that's it, right? So that's basically the lab 1. Let me know in the discussion forum, discussion board, if you have any questions about this lab. Thank you.